Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the greatest show on earth. It's the Take a Shot podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Gitman, and we are just rolling through the punches here on this wonderful Wednesday. The Dallas Mavericks took a 3-0 lead in the Western Conference Finals, and we will tell you how they did it. And Minnesota, unfortunately, have not sustained their success that they had in the Denver series, and we will tell you why that is the case. But they did win game 4 and they extended this series, and the NBA Finals is not set. And we will tell you how they did that and how they improved from their mistakes in the first 3 games. We do know, though, who will be representing the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals, and that is the Boston Celtics after they sweep the Indiana Pacers. And we will ask the question, was their run easy or was their run dominant? We will give you the answer to that shortly. And unfortunately, the Indiana Pacers season, the surprising run they made to the conference finals has come to an end, and we have to say, lights out Pacers. We've got all of that coming up on the show today, but first I want to get to a more serious topic and an unfortunate thing that happened on Monday. Hall of Famer Bill Walton has died of cancer at the age of 71. This is a very tragic and very sad passing because Bill Walton, not only was he this amazing player on the court, he was an MVP. He led the Portland Trailblazers to their only championship in NBA history in 79. He won another championship as the sixth man of the year in 86 with the Boston Celtics. He did all of that. He is a Hall of Famer in the NBA, and he was that great of a basketball player. But what stood out most about Bill Walton was that he was a great man. He was a great person. He was a great character as he extended his career from playing to broadcasting the game from the pro level to college. He was just this kind soul who wanted to help everybody else. He cared about others rather than himself first. He put those in front of him, which is something that not a lot of people have these days. And every single day, Bill Walton would say, "This is the luckiest day on earth, and I'm the luckiest person to be on this earth." And more people should have the attitude and have the perspective that Bill Walton has, because he was just genuinely that kind of a person. And it's very sad to see him go, because personally, as a basketball fan, I love to see him call games because he just brought that energy, just brought that joy. And even though I wouldn't necessarily be interested in watching the teams that Bill Walton was calling in college basketball, I would watch the games just because Bill Walton was calling the games, because that is how funny, that's how amazing, that's how joyous he brought other people together. He just uplifted everybody, whether that was through his broadcasting, whether that was in person. He was just that great of a human being. And even though, of course, I don't know him that well, he will be sadly missed. And this is a tragic and unexpected passing due to cancer for Bill Walton. And this is just something that hopefully doesn't happen to a lot of people. And rest in peace, Bill Walton. So let's go on now to the games. The Dallas Mavericks defeated the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first 3 games, and they've won down the stretch a lot of those games. Dallas has really taken control, taken a dominant command in this series for the first 3 games at least, as they won 108 to 105 in game 1, 109 to 108 in game 2, and 116 to 107 in game 3. All of those results being single digits. The Dallas Mavericks have done it because of their superstars. Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, those 2 players specifically have been great for Dallas consistently. And when you look at who is the best backcourt duo of all time, the way that Kyrie Irving, the way that Luka Doncic have been playing lately, you may have to give them some consideration if they win a championship this year, because those 2 are just pure elite scorers. Those 2, their job, what they have done for their whole careers, definitely Kyrie for the past 10, 12 years, Luka Doncic for the past 5 years, what they've been doing their whole career is one thing: score the ball. Be the guy to score the ball. And when you have 2 scorers like that, which is something that not a lot of teams have in the league, it really gives you that opportunity to rely on those 2 a lot, especially when the offense gets tight and maybe one of them doesn't have a great game. The other one usually does. You can pretty much guarantee that at least one of those 2 will have they're like 20 over 25 points in a single game, because that's how good and that's how skilled those two are on the basketball court. And when you look at teams who've won championships historically, you look at it, and most of the time they have at least two go-to guys, maybe a third, but definitely at least two go-to guys. And the Dallas Mavericks definitely have that in Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, and we will have to consider them, if they win a title this year, as one of the greatest backcourt duos of all time. Because trust me, honestly, even though I could have seen the series go the other way, I did pick Minnesota in 5. Pretty embarrassed about that one. Even though we could have seen the series go the other way, I could have seen the series go Dallas's way, which it's going now. I didn't expect Dallas to take a 3-0 lead. I thought it would have been 2-1. I don't even think Dallas themselves expected to be up 3-0. But at the end of the day, down the stretch, when the game gets tight, when you have those two guys and Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, you pretty much have the confidence and you pretty much have the ability to go and win every single close game, every single tight and contested game. And if you just keep the game close and you look at Minnesota's guys compared to Dallas's guys, the two that I want down the stretch to take the shot to lead my team to victory, Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic. And something that I like specifically about Luka Doncic that he has been approving upon this series is not complaining to the officials as much. He's really been focused. He's been mentally focused to win. He's not worrying about the other stuff. He's not getting distracted by the calls. He's just going out there. He's playing his best basketball to his best ability. And that's something that we really haven't seen all season long. Luka Doncic is focused. He clearly looks ready to win an NBA championship. And this is something we didn't expect. Also, Kyrie Irving, something that nobody ever thought he could do, be a leader on a basketball team. I said this last episode, but I will preach upon it again. When Kyrie Irving was in Cleveland, when Kyrie was in Boston, he didn't want to be there. He wanted to leave LeBron James. He didn't want to play with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. He didn't embrace the situation. In Brooklyn, that was a whole disaster with the COVID thing with Mayor Adams. And it was just probably the worst not worst roster construction, but the worst big three basically of all time, because we thought that big three could have won a title, and ultimately it was a disaster, one of the biggest disasters in NBA history. That was that. And he gets traded to Dallas, and it didn't really work out that well in year one. For the second half of the season, of course, Dallas missed the play-in entirely. They got the 11th seed, and questions were starting to get raised about if Luka Doncic and if Kyrie Irving can play together on the basketball court. And Kyrie Irving really personally took that to heart this offseason, worked on his character, became a better leader for this young team. And he's someone that really got a lot of trust from a guy like Jason Kidd, someone who's really been in Kyrie Irving's spot before, the second best player on a championship team, this point guard who's just trying to figure out the best possible situation for himself and for his teammates. That is a huge reason why Kyrie Irving has improved his character. And you've got to give credit to Jason Kidd, because Jason Kidd really, if you look at it, has had a similar career path to Kyrie Irving. Of course, he didn't get the ring until later. Kyrie Irving got the ring when he was young in 2016 with Cleveland. But Jason Kidd is really a similar kind of a player to Kyrie Irving, not necessarily in a game aspect, but in a pathway, in a attitude, in a mentality sort of an aspect, if you guys understand what I'm trying to say. So I think him being there, motivating Kyrie, telling him what to do, Kyrie relaxing, Kyrie embracing this new situation, new season with Dallas, and really helping this team perform to the maximum level that they are capable of performing. It's just been beautiful to see, and you've got to give a lot of credit to Kyrie Irving for his massive turnaround, because we've always thought of Kyrie Irving as this character, someone who would not be happy in any situation he would be, someone who would only cause problems. He would hinder team chemistry, not benefit team chemistry. And Kyrie Irving has changed the attitude for himself. He's changed the attitude for the Dallas Mavericks, and the Mavericks have continued to thrive upon that. But when you look at Dallas, of course, you've got to look at the role players as well. PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr., they have continued to thrive because remember, every single time Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving get past the defenders, PJ Washington, Derek Jones, those are the guys being asked to hit those crucial shots down the stretch, especially more PJ Washington. PJ Washington has been a guy that has consistently for the Dallas Mavericks hit clutch shots down the stretch of games, whether that was in the first round, last round, or even in these conference finals. PJ Washington has executed, he has hit the timely shots, and he has continued to be that third scoring option for the Dallas Mavericks. And it's been something that was a really big hit for Dallas because we didn't really expect or really didn't know what PJ Washington could bring to the table. Because remember, even though he was a great scorer in Charlotte, it's the Charlotte Hornets. What do you expect to do? Because Charlotte's just that terrible of a basketball team and a basketball organization. So he's going to get his shots more. Now he moves to the situation for Dallas. He's not necessarily the center of offense, but he's finding ways to score. He's finding ways to contribute offensively, setting pick and rolls, cutting to the basket, getting to the corner, getting to the places where Luka and Kyrie can set him up. I think the growth of PJ Washington from becoming this main scoring option in Charlotte to becoming this key role player for Dallas has been something that has been amazing and incredible to watch for Dallas. And he has been a huge reason why Dallas has continued their success. Then you kind of look at the big man, Derek Lively, of course, the rookie, and Daniel Gafford. Derek Lively, of course, got injured. He didn't play in game 4 when they lost last night as I'm filming this on Wednesday. But Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford have continued their presence this series, have continued to get huge rebounds, have continued to get huge defensive stops, and for some of those games have flat out just outplayed Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. And to see that as Derek Lively being a rookie, Daniel Gafford being this young center, it's something that probably nobody expected going into this series. And you've got to give those guys a lot of credit for continuing to prevent second chance opportunities, for continuing to set great screens, give Luka and Kyrie the opportunities to run the offense, to thrive, and to score. Those guys have been impactful on both sides of the ball. And we really talk more about Derek Lively's impact rather than Daniel Gafford's because Derek Lively is the rookie. Derek Lively's just being where he is in this position that he's playing with backup center, but he's just making that big of an impact as a rookie. You got to give him credit there, but I think people forget about Daniel Gafford a little bit. Daniel Gafford has been, if not just as impactful, more impactful than Derek Lively in pretty much the same ways that Lively brings to the table. And those two together, especially Daniel Gafford, have just elevated and continued to improve Dallas's performance both offensively and especially defensively because we know where Dallas was last year on the defensive side of the ball. They were an absolute disaster, and the presence of the big man protecting the paint, which is something that Dallas didn't really do well last season or even quite honestly the first half of this season, those two have continued to be presence there. And then Dallas, really their bench has for the most part, not been as big of a factor as Minnesota's bench, of course. But you've got guys like Dante Exum, you've got guys like Josh Green, even Jaden Hardy, guys stepping up to score the basketball when their number is called upon. And that's all you can ask for a championship team. You've got young guys there who are ready to work, ready to perform off the bench, ready to give it their all when their number is called upon. And that's all you can ask. Giving Luka and Kyrie opportunities to run the offense, get open shots, and really set those two up for success, both on the pass and both on the shot. That's all you can ask for your role players because we know what this Dallas team runs with. It's, as I mentioned, Kyrie and Luka. It's their offense, their team. And these role players have continued to revolve around them perfectly. There's been no conflicts of who's getting the ball. There's been no conflicts of I'm not playing enough. This Dallas team's chemistry is at an all-time high. They're playing like it, and they're just performing in a way that I don't think a lot of people could have seen as they really had a bad first half of the season. We know we saw signs of it in the second half of what they're doing now, but we didn't expect Dallas to continue and sustain this success that they are having right now. So you've got to give a lot of credit to the Dallas Mavericks for what they're doing. And even with the loss in game 4, they are still one win away from the NBA Finals. And we would have thought that could have never happened this season, especially the way the Western Conference shaped out with Minnesota, yet obviously Denver, Oklahoma City, even the Clippers you can put on that list. Dallas was just this middle of the pack team in the Western Conference playoffs, and they are finding ways to win basketball games on the backs of their two best players, and that's all you can ask for a championship contending team. So Dallas, even though they lost a game, they are still one win away from the finals, and that is something that nobody probably expected to happen in this postseason. But let's move on to the Minnesota Timberwolves aspect of this and what has really gone wrong for Minnesota in the series. Why have they continued to really just break down against this Dallas team that, for quite honestly, that I thought Minnesota was just flat out better against? There's three main reasons, and I'm going to break them down individually one by one. Number one is Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns is supposed to be the second best player on this basketball team. He is supposed to be the second best scorer on this Minnesota team, and he has continued, and especially in the first three games. Fourth game is a different story. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But for the first three games, Karl Anthony Towns was shooting a horrific 3 of 25 from the three-point line. And Karl Anthony Towns, that's what he does. He claims he is the best shooting big man in the entire league. So why isn't Karl Anthony Towns shooting the ball that well? He's saying, oh, the bounces haven't been going well. That's his excuse. Well, there's no excuses in the postseason. At the end of the day, you need to perform to the ability that you had in the regular season, if not better than what you did in the regular season. And Karl Anthony Towns has not done that in the postseason for at least those first three games. And there had to be decisions made. He had to get benched in one of the games, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was game 2 where Karl Anthony Towns got benched down the stretch when Luka Doncic hit the game winner. Personally, I thought he should have played down the stretch because he is, even for his struggles, Minnesota's second best option offensively. And it kind of cost Minnesota. Then he played game 3. But just by sitting out the second game, it just shows the message of he's not playing that great. He's not performing to the standards that we expect him to perform to. And that's a concern because you're going up against probably the best guard 1-2 punch in the league right now in Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving and Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. We'll get to Edwards in a little bit, but Karl Anthony Towns needs to help Anthony Edwards perform to the ability of those two guys, because those two guys are pretty much carrying Dallas's offense. And we know Minnesota's more of a defensive heavy, defensive centric team. And Karl Anthony Towns they need all the offense they can get, because they, like, for how good they are on defense, for how good they have been all season, they're not the greatest offensive team. We know that. We know that they rely on their defense so much. They're not this top 5 offense. They need scoring. Karl Anthony Towns is supposed to be that, and he has not. And what has been concerning is for how bad Karl Anthony Towns has been shooting from the three-point line, it's not even that. It's the fact that he's shooting that bad and he's not attacking the paint. He's not going into the paint, because we see the mismatches Karl Anthony Towns has with PJ Washington, with Derrick Jones Jr. He is 7 feet. He needs to attack the paint. He needs to be better there, and especially when you have those mismatches, because whenever Lively and Daniel Gafford were in the game, they were guarding Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is getting those two, and because he's the guy who's scoring in the paint. But if you're looking at Karl Anthony Towns, we know you can shoot from 3, but you have to explore going in the paint. These mismatches, these 3 to 4 inch mismatches are something you need to attack. You are stronger, you are bigger, and you should be more physical than those guys. And you should take advantage of that. And that's something Karl Anthony Towns did not do. And instead, he continued to take 3-point shots. He continued to miss the shots, and he continued to be this negative asset, both offensively and defensively as well, because we know Karl Anthony Towns isn't necessarily the best defender. And if you're being that negative asset on both sides of the ball, why are you on the court? Why are you playing right now in this crucial conference finals, game 2 or game 3? It makes complete sense why Minnesota benched him, and it sent a message to him. They didn't bench him in game 3 because I think they benched Rudy Gobert, but at the same point, the message is sent. Karl Anthony Towns is the number one and main reason why Minnesota has lost the first 3 games, why Minnesota got down to this huge hole, and he needs to play better overall. Number 2, Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is someone who we thought to be one of the greatest defenders of this generation. He's a 4-time defensive player of the year, and you got to give credit where credit is due there. 3 in Utah, 1 in Minnesota. He's been great defensively for pretty much his whole career, but he's really been exposed on that side of the ball this postseason. He has been the guy that Dallas is targeting. He has been the guy that Dallas has continued to go at, and when you look at Rudy Gobert on the pick and roll, when he has to guard guys like Luka Doncic, guys like Kyrie Irving, he cannot do that. He cannot be that scary presence defensively. And when you think of a defensive player of the year, like a Dwight Howard, like a Ben Wallace, even like a Draymond Green, they are defensive presence who can guard 1 through 5, even though and when asked upon, even though the Dwight Howards and Ben Wallaces of the world aren't really guarding the perimeter, when asked upon, they will execute. They will guard anybody 1 through 5 on the floor. We know Draymond can do that, but Rudy Gobert pretty much is being exposed defensively. How can you say a defensive player of the year is being exposed defensively? Rudy Gobert has been a liability for Minnesota, and that's why they benched him game 3 down the stretch. That's why questions are being raised about his play and his performance. That's why questions are being raised if Rudy Gobert should play off the bench, if Minnesota should go a little bit more smaller. Those questions are being raised for Minnesota. And I think it actually makes sense if Rudy Gobert does come off the bench for Minnesota, because when you look at it, I think Karl Anthony Towns will now be guarded by guys like Lively and Daniel Gafford, and he will stretch those guys out the perimeter. And even if they guard Naz Reid, same thing. Naz Reid will stretch them out the perimeter as well, and it will open up the basket for guys like Anthony Edwards, for guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jaden McDaniels. Those are big reasons why Rudy Gobert could potentially be benched. And I really definitely considered it going into game 4. Of course, they won game 4, and now things changed a little bit. But after those first 3 games, you're like, Rudy Gobert, what are you doing? Like, why is he even out there at this point? It's just that big of a concern for Minnesota. And if he continues to play like this, especially when it gets tighter in game 5, when Dallas is like, up, pick and roll, get Gobert on Luka, Kyrie. We got this in the bag. What are you going to do if you're Minnesota? You can't just sit there and expect him to play, can you? And number 3 is Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards, we saw what he did against Denver. He is the star of Minnesota. He is the guy that Minnesota is supposed to say, take me to the promised land, Ant. Take me to where we need to go. And Anthony Edwards has played great in the first half of games, but when it's getting to the fourth quarter, Anthony Edwards looks gassed out there. Anthony Edwards looks tired. And yes, give credit to Dallas for their great defense. Give Dallas credit for their schemes on Anthony Edwards. Good job, Dallas. But at the end of the day, this is not about that. This is about your star, no matter what the circumstances, when healthy, when playing on the court, performing to the ability that you expect him to perform. Because in the NBA Finals, you're going to need a 1A. You're going to need a guy to say, take me there. That's basically every championship team. 2023, Jokic. 22, Curry. 21, Giannis. We can go down and down the list. Every team has that. Minnesota, in the first couple of games, we had to question whether that was the case, because Anthony Edwards, although he had great first halves, in the fourth quarter, he would just go away. He would be a no-show in the fourth quarter, and at the end of the day, that is not going to work. Anthony Edwards needs to perform, and these games have been close for Minnesota. These games have been winnable games for the Timberwolves, and when it gets down the stretch, when it's tied down the stretch, even when Minnesota has a lead, they had a 4-point lead down the stretch. In game 2, they had, if I'm not mistaken, a decent lead down the stretch in game 3. Minnesota just didn't execute. And you've got to put a lot of blame on Anthony Edwards there because he ran out of gas. He wasn't being able to score. He had to give the ball up to a Naz Reid for a game-winning three. He had to give the ball up to Karl Anthony Towns for another disastrous three-point shot. That's just not going to work. We want Anthony Edwards taking the shot. If you're Minnesota, we want Anthony Edwards to be that because we've seen Anthony Edwards. We know what he's capable of doing. This is not a situation of, oh, Anthony Edwards is not that guy. We know he's the guy. We know that Anthony Edwards can perform at this level, and we know Anthony Edwards can take Minnesota to a championship because they just beat the defending champions in 7 games. Of course, we're going to expect that. So why not in this series? It gets tougher and tougher as the postseason goes, and you're going to have to continue to play at your 100%. And yes, you're going to get more tired because it's a long postseason. The Denver series took a lot out of you, but it doesn't matter. You want to win a championship, you are going to play at your best. You're going to have to play at your best. And Anthony Edwards did not do that the first 3 games. He played terrible in fourth quarters. And that's something when you're Minnesota looking at why they lost is because Anthony Edwards is giving the ball up. He doesn't want the moment. He's tired and he's worried about missing shots. I don't care. I'd rather die with Anthony Edwards missing the shot than die with any other player missing the shot. I will be okay if Anthony Edwards takes and misses the shot to win games, takes and misses the shot down the stretch, because I trust him more than any Minnesota Timberwolves player, and I think everybody in the entire world does as well. So why isn't Edwards taking the shots? Maybe it's a coaching thing. Maybe it's an Anthony Edwards thing. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Who knows? But there should be an emphasis on giving Anthony Edwards the ball down the stretch, giving Anthony Edwards the opportunity to score, and Anthony Edwards not giving up the basketball. Those 3 guys, their 3 best players, are the reason why Minnesota has basically given up these games, and these games are all winnable for Minnesota. These games have all been single-digit games decided down the stretch, and those 3 best players that you are supposed to rely upon in Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, have been somewhat of liabilities, have not wanted it down the stretch, and have just been exposed. And it's something that Minnesota needs to fix up in these next 3 games to finish off the series if they want any shot at making the historic 3-0 comeback. But let's talk about what they did to change the narrative after game 4, as they did win game 4 and they have saved their season. The noise, the little bit of a chatter about Karl Anthony Towns has calmed down a little bit. Everything just a little bit more settled in for Minnesota. They finally got the win, and that is something that is crucial for Minnesota if they want, as I mentioned, any chance at winning this series, coming back from 3-0, which is something nobody has done in NBA history, and it's been 155-0 the other way around, as teams have continued to not blow those leads. Of course, we saw what happened last year with Miami and Boston, as Boston almost did it. You never know what would have happened if Tatum didn't injure his ankle, but that was a little bit scary. But still, nobody has ever done it. And Minnesota, just a little bit more life. Minnesota got that crucial win on the road, and now they go back home. And why did they do it? How did they do it? I'll give you one answer. It's something that we just mentioned a couple minutes ago. Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns in this specific basketball game did something that we haven't seen him do all postseason long. Go to the paint, attack the paint, be more of a presence down there, perform and execute in the fourth quarter. In the first half, we were like, uh-oh, here's Karl Anthony Towns again, jacking up 3-point shots, only 5 points in the first half, not doing what he's supposed to be doing. In the second half, completely changed that narrative, scoring 25 points, shooting 8 of his field goal attempts out of his 13 inside the paint, actually hitting his 3-point shots, because what my theory is if you get going on the inside, I don't care what shot is it, if it's a layup, if it's a dunk, if it's some free throws, if you just get it going a little bit down low, a little bit in the paint, a little bit in the close 2-point shots, you will get more confidence to hit the 3-point shots. Just that's my theory from playing basketball, from watching basketball, from seeing it with the NBA for years. I feel like if you get a couple of shots going, some easy ones, that will give you the confidence, that will give you the ability to hit those 3-point shots. And that is what Karl Anthony Towns did. He hit 7 straight points in the paint. He attacked the paint, which is something we haven't seen him do, and that's something he clearly emphasized in the second half. And then it got his three-point shot going. He hit 4 or 5 threes, which is his best three-point shooting performance all postseason long. And that is why Minnesota won. It was all him. Anthony Edwards had a great game as well, 29 points. He didn't fold in the fourth quarter. But the number one reason is Karl Anthony Towns, because even with Anthony Edwards playing great, you're still going to need someone else. Because remember, on the other side, you've got Luka Doncic, you've got Kyrie Irving. You're going to have to outscore and outplay them. And Anthony Edwards is going to need a scoring partner. He's going to need someone to help him do that. And Karl Anthony Towns helped Anthony Edwards outperform Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic in this game as he got to the paint. He got going a little bit. Then finally, his outside shot started hitting. That was it. That was purely the reason why. Karl Anthony Towns, Karl Anthony Towns, Karl Anthony Towns. Of course, Minnesota did something that they haven't done all series long, play better down the stretch. Anthony Edwards finally got the ball, which is something that I said a couple of minutes ago that he didn't do. Anthony Edwards, when Dallas was up, when Minnesota was up 3, got the ball with 39 seconds to go, hit that crucial shot to give them a 5-point lead. That happened. Anthony Edwards did that. Of course, Luka hit that miracle 3-and-1. He missed the free throw. But if that would have happened and Anthony Edwards didn't hit the shot, then that would have been a whole different ball game. But Anthony Edwards was huge down the stretch, hit the shots that we expect him to hit, and got the ball like he's supposed to. And that is why Minnesota won. That is why the Timberwolves are back in this, not back in the series, but got a little bit of life, got a little bit of momentum going into game 5, finally got that game to give them a little more confidence. And if you give this Minnesota team confidence, it can be a very, very scary situation because we know what Minnesota's capable of doing. They just beat the defending champs, as I mentioned. If you can beat Denver, you can beat Dallas. And Minnesota showed fight, they showed life, and it was on the efforts of the stars. Of course, it helps when guys like Mike Conley, guys like Rudy Gobert are stepping up offensively, with Rudy Gobert scoring 13, Mike Conley scoring 14. And that helps. That definitely helps. But at the end of the day, it's your star players. And what I really liked about this win in particular was all Minnesota's star players, Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, all in foul trouble for most of this basketball contest. And yet they still found ways to perform. They still found ways to win. They still found ways to come back, stay out of foul trouble when it mattered the most, even though Karl Anthony Towns fouled out a little bit late. When it mattered the most, Karl Anthony Towns was still in the game. He was still playing, and Minnesota executed with him on the court. They executed with him off the court, giving the ball to Anthony Edwards like they should. And the fight that Minnesota showed, even with the foul trouble, even though they had the 10-point lead, they gave it up. Dallas finally had some momentum, and it looked like, here we go. Dallas is going to come back once again, and down the stretch, here comes the Dallas Mavericks. Minnesota silenced everybody, and Minnesota did something that they haven't done this series. Win down the stretch and win in a close game situation. They did that. They extended this series, and they saved their season. Now the question is, can they actually do it? Can the Minnesota Timberwolves do something that no team has ever done before? Come back from a 3-0 deficit. This has never happened in NBA history. 155-0, as I mentioned earlier. The closest to ever do it that we remember was last year when Miami got up 3-0. Boston won Game 4 on the road, gave them a little bit of momentum, got Game 5 at home, won that close Game 6, a tightly contested Game 6 at the buzzer from Derek White, and then lost in Game 7 at home. Maybe because of the Tatum injury, also in part because Miami played that great on the road, and it's hard to beat a team 4 times in a row. And even if Minnesota, let's say, did force a Game 7, it's hard to beat Dallas 4 times in a row. It's hard to beat any NBA team 4 times in a row. That's just the reality of the situation. Nobody can ask upon a team to beat a great team 4 times in a row. That is so hard to do in the NBA. And even this situation right now, it's hard to beat Minnesota 4 times in a row. That's why people picked the Timberwolves to win this game, because it's hard to beat a great caliber team like the Timberwolves 4 times in a row if you're Dallas. And Minnesota, it's going to be the same situation if they want to win this series. They're going to have to win 4 times in a row. That's hard. But Minnesota did get life. Minnesota got it going a little bit. And if they continue that success, you never know what can happen. Remember, Game 5's in Minnesota, right? They get that. Let's just say they get that. It's 3-2 now, going back to Dallas for a crucial game 6 that Dallas must have. Let's say Minnesota has a great game. Now you've got game 7 at home, and you're going to have an opportunity to make history. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I am not saying it's going to happen because it's never happened before in NBA history, and it shouldn't happen. This should never happen at all, especially when a team's that much in control of a series. This should not happen. But Minnesota did get life. They are at home for game 5, and a 3-2 deficit is a lot more comfortable than a 3-0 deficit. And we saw it last year. A game 7 happened. Why not this year? I'm not saying it's going to happen. And I do think Minnesota is going to win game 5. And I think Dallas will finish it in 6 because I think Dallas is that great of a basketball team. And it's hard to beat them 3 times in a row. I think Dallas will win in 6. I think Dallas should very well finish in 6. But if they mess up at home in game 6, what can happen? What can happen? And if this were to get to a game 6, I may change the pick to Minnesota. I don't know yet. Of course, Dallas can shut up the questions, shut up the rumors, shut up the lingers if they just win game 5 on the road. But that's difficult. Winning 3 times on the road is not an easy task, people. It's really not. So the chit chatter is going to start. And especially as each game comes upon and Minnesota gets it going a little bit, that chit chatter will rise and rise and rise. And Dallas should have closed this series out in game 4. They should have ended it when they were supposed to end it, which was game 4 at home. You are supposed to close out a series at home when you have the opportunity to do so. And Dallas didn't. And now we go back to Minnesota and now we await what happens. Yes, Dallas, as I mentioned, 2-0 in Minnesota, but still, it's tough to win basketball games on the road in the postseason. It's just tough to do so. And the thing about it, not having home court for Minnesota, it's not necessarily always about having that crucial game 5 at home when there's a 2-2 series. Having that crucial game 7, of course, when it's 3-3. If you were to get down 3-1, if you were to get down 3-0, you still have the opportunity to go out and make the comeback because remember, if you were down 3-1, 2 of the last 3 games are at your home arena. Don't forget that. If you're the home team and you're down 3-1, 2 of those games are at your home arena. I'm not saying it should happen, and it really shouldn't at all. But you have an opportunity to go out, and if you just get 1 game on the road and win the games you're supposed to at home, what can happen? What can happen? And Minnesota has the opportunity to do that. If they win the games at home they're supposed to, and they somehow get another one on the road in Dallas, they find a way to win game 6. What can happen? Dallas needs to be careful. That's all I'm saying. Still got Dallas winning the series. I got Minnesota winning game 5, but I still got Dallas winning this series. Be careful, though, Dallas, because you were supposed to close out this series yesterday, and you didn't. And now the questions will be raised, and this series could get very interesting very quickly. So we will see what happens there. I don't think it's going to happen, but Dallas got to be careful now. Dallas definitely has to be careful. But let's move on to the Eastern Conference Finals as the Boston Celtics, for the second time in 3 years, have made the NBA Finals. They defeated the Pacers in Game 4, 105-102. Jaylen Brown getting the Eastern Conference Finals MVP honors. And before we answer the question, I want to talk about that for a second. Yes, there's the questions like, why didn't Tatum get Eastern Conference Finals MVP? Tatum is the best player for this Boston team. Well, in this series, ladies and gentlemen, Jaylen Brown was the best player. I'm sorry. I don't care what Tatum has done all season long. Jaylen Brown was the best basketball player in this series, and it wasn't a question. Hitting that game-winning shot to win and potentially alter this series in game 1, hitting that game not winning shot, game tying shot to alter this series in game 1, forcing overtime and winning overtime, change that series. Jaylen Brown has continued to dominate this series, has quite frankly been the best player. Remember, game 2, Jaylen Brown had a dominant performance with 40 points. Game 3 was a huge part in their comeback in the second half. And I'm not saying Tatum wasn't bad. Tatum had inconsistent games, though. He had an inconsistent game 1, a little bit of a game 2. He got it going in game 3 and game 4. But Tatum didn't really have a consistent series, and Jaylen Brown did. which is why he won Eastern Conference Finals MVP 5-4. So I'm not angry at that. I think Jaylen Brown deserves it. And the fact that he didn't make All NBA, I thought was ridiculous, because when you're the best team with the best record, you're the number one seed in the league, you have home court throughout the playoffs, and you got 64 wins. You're not telling me 2 players should be on the All NBA team? That's ridiculous. Jaylen Brown should have been on the All NBA team, and Porzingis and should have had consideration as well, because that Boston was just that good this year. I just didn't understand how you could put only one player on that team on the top 15 best players. And it wasn't even really the top 15 best players, because remember, some of those guys weren't eligible because of injuries, like Joel Embiid, like a Jimmy Butler. Some of those guys weren't eligible. So the fact that Jaylen Brown wasn't still on there made no sense to me at all, but he definitely deserves this. He deserves the recognition, because he's just been that great for this Boston Celtics team. Now, to the question, was their run easy, or was their run? Yes, you got to give credit where credit is due for the Celtics. They did win the games that they were supposed to be in front of them. They did win against the teams that were put in front of them. They did win. They only lost 2 games in the postseason, one against the Heat, one against the Cleveland Cavaliers. We get all of that, right? They were great, and they won the games that they were supposed to win. But at the end of the day, this was an historically easy run. You're telling me when you played the Miami Heat, you got no Jimmy Butler, you've got no Terry Rozier, you've got no Jaime Jaquez Jr. for the last game. I mean, what do you expect to happen? I'm not saying Miami would have won the series, because Boston was just a flat-out better team than the Heat. But that could have been an interesting series. They got a game without Butler. Why couldn't they have gotten 2 or 3 with Butler? I'm not saying Miami would have won the series, but it would have been more of a challenge. It would have been more of a Boston prove it against this Heat team that beat you last year. This Heat team that they played, it was a cakewalk, and they did what they were supposed to do. And they probably should have swept them, but they didn't. They still won the series, but that series could have been more interesting with Jimmy Butler. Cleveland Cavaliers series. No Jared Allen the entire series. Donovan Mitchell, game 4 and 5. No, nada, not there. And they probably would have won game 4 with Donovan Mitchell, in my opinion. And that series could have been interesting and went to 6. And then Karis LeVert's out for game 5, game 5 as well. More injuries. Tyrese Halliburton for the Indiana Pacers, games 3 and 4 were out. They definitely would have won 1 game, if not 2, if Tyrese Halliburton was playing. And Indiana sure gave them plenty of opportunities to win those games, especially game 1. That come on, any other team would have won that game. You're not telling me that any other basketball team up 3 with 10 seconds to go would have won that. I mean, come on. And then you've got the 2 games on the road when Halliburton's out. That series could have easily been 3-1. And then you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference. Even if you wouldn't have played the Pacers, you've got the Knicks. They're all injured up. You've got Julius Randle injured, OG Anunoby, Bogdanovich, even Brunson broke his hand. If the Knicks would have won, the Bucks, Giannis injured, Damian Lillard injured. Who's the 6th seed? Yeah, 6 seed's Indiana, 7 seed Philadelphia 76ers. Yes, you've got Joel Embiid hurt. And then, like, the point is, every single person, every single team had at least one important person who was essentially injured, other than the Orlando Magic. That was the matter of the deal. And Boston had a cakewalk and essentially a bye to the NBA Finals. Now, should they lose the NBA Finals? No, they should probably win, because they're the flat-out best team on paper, and we all know that, and we all have to agree on that. They should win. Are they going to win? We don't know. But this was by far the easiest path in NBA history to an NBA Finals appearance. I'm sorry, I don't know what anybody else can say about that. Yes, you had the 2021 Milwaukee Bucks with the injury to Trae Young in the conference finals, Durant foot on the line, Kyrie and James Harden out. That was pretty easy as well. But the entire conference being out, this is Boston's best opportunity to win a championship. And if they don't execute this year, when are they going to execute? When are they going to get the job done? Because this is the easiest we've ever seen it. This was a bye to the finals, as I said. Boston didn't even have to try. They didn't. And they should have won 12-0, in my opinion. They shouldn't have lost a game. They really shouldn't have lost a single basketball game in this postseason. They won. They made it to the finals like they're supposed to. Yay. Now you're going to be tested against a dominant Western team, whether that's Dallas, which is the most likely case, or whether somehow Minnesota pulls off that historic comeback. They are going to be tested. And we don't know what's going to happen because Boston 64 wins have came on this weak Eastern Conference side of things, while Dallas and Minnesota have really grinded it out in this tough Western Conference. So we don't know how good Boston is compared to Dallas, compared to Minnesota. We don't know the answer to that question. But this is the ultimate test for the Celtics. If they cannot get it done this year, questions will be raised. Do they fire Joe Mazzulla when they make the finals? I mean, the standard's raised. The standard is raised for the Celtics team, but do they fire him? Do you have to consider breaking up Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum? I'm just asking the questions. I'm not saying it should happen. I'm just raising the questions of what could possibly happen if the Celtics lose the finals. What could happen? Because this is the year. This is the opportunity. This is what Boston has been waiting for. They got another crack at it, which not a lot of teams get a second chance at a finals opportunity. They just don't. And Boston has that chance. They have to execute and they have to get it done this year, because if it's not, when is it going to be? Because the East is only going to get better. Remember, Milwaukee's going to get healthier. Damon Giannis, no matter what the issues in Milwaukee have been this season, it's Damon Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's scary. New York coming back healthy. They're going to be a threat. They've got a lot of draft picks and that they can trade to get another star with there. Philadelphia, of course, has the cap space. They could make a trade. They could sign someone big in free agency. And then you've got these other teams like Indiana still rising. You never know what Miami's going to do. Orlando's on the rise as well. And Cleveland's going to make some moves this offseason. You just don't know what's going to happen. The East is going to get better next season. I think we all can say that. So Boston has to win a title this year. They have to. They have to. This, by far, will be the easiest championship run. And I'm not going to put an asterisk on their title. And I don't think anybody should, because they've been dominant all season long. But boy, oh boy, the pressure is on. And June 6th, on that Thursday, a week from tomorrow, we are going to find out a lot about this Celtics team, because we have no idea who the Celtics really are, because they've just been cruising by this Eastern Conference. We're going to find out whether that's Minnesota or whether that's Dallas. And I really want Dallas to end this series quickly, because I want Dallas to have as much rest as possible in order to play Boston at almost 100%. Because if this gets to a 7-game series, I think Boston will win. If Dallas ends it tomorrow night, that will be a tougher pick, because I think rest does matter when going into an NBA Finals. You look at last year, Miami should have swept the Celtics. Denver swept the Lakers. Miami could have had the same amount of rest as Denver. They made it a 7-game series, and Miami didn't have any rest. They were going banged up into the finals. Couldn't really have the opportunity to relax for a little bit. And I'm not saying Miami would have won, but it does make a difference. It definitely makes a difference in what could have potentially happened. 100%. So I really hope Dallas finds a way to close this out. But if they don't, it should even be more of a reason why Boston should win. And the pressure's on the Celtics. We're not going to stop this pressure on Boston. I'm sorry. This is the best team I think I've seen in a couple of years, since the Golden State Warriors. Since the 2017-2018 Golden State Warriors, this is the best team I've seen on paper. They've got to get it done. They've got to get it done. Brad Stevens has done a great job. Even Joe Mazzulla has done a great job as a young coach, setting up this team for success. At the end of the day, you've got Jason Tatum, even Jaylen Brown, put them in the conversation, got to be at their best. We know Porzingis is going to come back, definitely for sure. And that just puts more burden on it, more of a reason why they should win. And we will see, because I think no matter whether they play Minnesota or Dallas, they are the flat-out better team. It's going to be a great finals, and we will see what the fate of this Boston Celtics team is. But let's finish off the episode with a lights out segment with the Indiana Pacers. Of course, they just got swept by the Boston Celtics in the conference finals, and a sad yet joyful ending, because remember, those conference finals, for even though it was a sweep, that was a competitive sweep. I don't like to say sweeps are competitive, because at the end of the day, the team beat you 4-0. Like, that's domination. That's dominance. But all of those games, Indiana other than game 2, had opportunities to win. And I said it a couple minutes ago. You could make the case that Indiana should have been up 3-1. You definitely should have. But at the end of the day, Halliburton got out. Indiana fell to Boston. It fell to a much better team. And it was expected. It was expected, but Indiana had a great run, and they should really keep their heads up. They should not have their heads down. They had a great season, and Indiana fans should be hopeful for what the future holds for this basketball squad. Now, they're free agents. Of course, Pascal Siakam's the big one. He's unrestricted for Indiana. Doug McDermott as well, and James Johnson follows, but I expect James Johnson to retire. Doug McDermott been with Indiana before. I don't know what they're going to do with him. Let him walk, resign. That doesn't matter. Siakam's the big one, of course. Pascal Siakam has expressed interest that he wants to stay in Indiana. He wants to be an Indiana Pacer. He was happy with the situation in Indiana. Of course, even better now with where they were in the NBA playoffs, where they finished. And I expect it to get done. Of course, there's other teams that can offer him a lot of money, like Philadelphia, maybe even, or you could throw Orlando in there. There are teams that have the opportunity to do that, but at the end of the day, he wants to be in Indiana, and Indiana is probably going to have to give him a max contract, and they should, because of the success they had this season, because of the success he had with Tyrese Halliburton. He deserves the money. He played great for Indiana. And if you want to keep him, if you want to continue this success for this young team built around Tyrese Halliburton, you're going to have to give Pascal Siakam his money. There's no questions there. Expect him to resign. That's not going to be a concern unless they don't give him the money that he is going to ask for, which most likely they are. Now, the Jalen Smith, third string center, has a player option. He showed some signs this season, though. I don't know if he'll take it. I'm assuming he's going to take the player option. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he played a little bit this season. He had a solid season. And then restricted free agents. Obi Toppin is the big one here. Obi Toppin could get a lot of money from another team, because I really like what Obi Toppin has done this season for Indiana. I thought he really revived his career, especially after being in New York, being behind Julius Randle, not having a lot of opportunity to play, getting that opportunity in Indiana under Rick Carlisle, and really thrived. And I picked him preseason to be the most improved player, actually be the sixth man of the year. Not sixth man of the year, the most improved player. That's what I meant. Be the most improved player, because I thought he's going to make such a big jump. But of course, that didn't happen because Siakam obviously came at the trade deadline, and that changed things a little bit. But I don't know if Indiana's going to re-sign him, because if you're going to give Siakam that max money, Indiana's going to be in a situation where they are going to be in the luxury tax for the first time in years. And I don't know if another team like the Jazz or the Pistons say, Obi Toppin, here's $20 million a year. You're not going to get paid this anywhere else. Is Indiana going to match? Are they considering they're going to give Siakam $45 million a year? That's a tough one to answer. We'll see what happens there, but Obi Toppin could be on the move. Obi Toppin could definitely be on the move for Indiana, and he is replaceable. Remember, you've got Siakam. You don't really need a lot of backup 4 minutes. He is definitely someone who is flexible to replace, but I did like what I saw from him this season. I think Indiana should try to keep him because he was great, but at the end of the day, if you're going to re-sign Siakam, you know the risks of being in the luxury tax. You know what's potentially going to happen, and you know this is a business, and he could potentially walk to another team for more money, and that's what it is. Other restricted free agents are most of their rookies and two-way guys: Oscar Tshiebwe, Isaiah Wong, Quentin Jackson. Not really too worried about them. They have the 36th, 49th, and 50th picks in the draft. Indiana, of course, lost their first-round pick this year due to the Pascal Siakam trade. They will lose, if I'm not mistaken, 2026, 2028 first-round picks as well in this Pascal Siakam trade. And I don't think they have a lot of tradable first-round picks, so they really can't make a big splash in the offseason for as trade-wise. But those second-round picks, they could potentially package to get a first-round pick if they want to move up in the draft. I don't think they're going to do that because, remember, this draft class is really weak unless they just absolutely love a player at that 25 through 30 range. I don't really see them doing a lot. I think they're going to draft the young guys with their picks, maybe make a move for one of them. But they just don't really have a lot of flexibility to make trades in the draft, really go out for somebody, because they don't really have the draft capital. All they can trade is second-round picks. I think they can trade 8. They have 8 tradable second-round picks, and that's pretty much it for assets because of that Siakam trade. Now, extension-wise, of course, you have TJ McConnell. He's up for an extension. I'm assuming Indiana's going to extend him. I don't know personally. I love TJ McConnell. He's one of my favorite players He's just this dog on defense. He really is a leader. He's someone who just changes the flow, changes the pace of the game, and he's the one who controls the game. And I absolutely love TJ McConnell. I hope they give him an extension because he deserves it. He definitely deserves the money because he's just somebody who you just love to see play on the court. He's just one of those guys who really give it 100% and really fight for their minutes, fight for pretty much every single loose ball. Just one of those dog kind of a players, and you just really love to see it there. Of course, Andrew Nemhard up for an extension. Now, this gets a little more interesting, this extension talk with Andrew Nemhard, because, of course, what he did in these last couple of games in the postseason, what he's done this postseason, he's shown that he is a potential third option for Indiana. He's shown that he can score the ball very consistently. He's shown ability to do that. So these extension talks could get a little bit interesting with Andrew Nemhard. I don't know what will happen. I think Indiana will give him the money because he's been that great. But remember, Indiana's going to be in this position now with Siakam. They're going to be in the luxury tax, and decisions are going to have to be made. I don't know what's going to happen with the Nemhard extension. We expect it to get done. Who knows what will happen there? But I think he will get paid 20 to 25 million because Andrew Nemhard has just been that great for Indiana, and he will probably continue being that great. And I think he could potentially be a candidate next year to be one of the most improved players. He can be that elite, in my opinion, because he has been great for Indiana and he showed a lot of potential this postseason, and his future is really bright in this league. So we'll see what happens there. Of course, Jalen Smith, Isaiah Jackson up for extensions as well. Isaiah Jackson may get a small extension there because he was pretty solid with the backup center position. I don't expect Indiana to make a lot of moves, but I think the one move they have to make in free agency is to get a paint presence and rim protector big man, because Indiana was the worst defense in the league in the paint. And I love Miles Turner. I love Siakam, but they're going to need a backup center. They're going to need someone to bring that kind of defensive force, defensive presence, because we know how good Indiana is on offense. If they just had a little bit more defense, they would be an elite basketball team. And maybe that requires moving Miles Turner. Maybe that does. But Indiana definitely needs more defensive presence in the paint. And that's all I got for you for Indiana. That's all I got for the show today. Thank you so much for watching the Take Your Shot podcast. Remember to please follow me on Instagram at take_your_shot_podcast_. That's at take_your_shot_podcast_. And tell me how you would have taken your shots on these takes. That's all my shots for the day, folks. I will see you on Friday, and we will see if Dallas goes to the NBA Finals or Minnesota forces a game 6, because this series took a turn, and we will see what happens there. It's going to be a great Thursday of basketball. No basketball today because the Celtics obviously took care of business. We are getting closer to deciding who will be the NBA champion. That is exciting. Remember to leave a like and subscribe. And as I said, we will see you Friday.